My name is Maxine Jones, but my friends call me Max. I'm 37 years old now, and this story is from when I was just 11. It's a story I've never been able to forget. All the names here have been changed to protect the camp and the people involved, but the events are as real as the scars I carry from that summer. I grew up in an affluent family in a wealthy area, surrounded by all the comforts money could buy. My parents, however, were overprotective to an almost suffocating degree. The day camp and overnight camp I attended reflected this mindset perfectly. It was a fun place, sure, but also oppressive in its rules. Even the high schoolers weren't allowed to go to the bathroom alone, a counselor had to accompany them. My parents loved the camp because it felt safe, but to me, it felt like a gilded cage. Then, by a twist of fate, everything changed. In second grade, my mom accidentally checked the wrong box on the registration form, and I was signed up for a week of circus camp. It was a place unlike anything I had ever experienced, and it turned my world upside down. Circus camp treated us like real people. We didn't have to ask permission to go to the bathroom, we could wander around the campus freely, and the counselors didn't hover over us every second of the day. They trusted us to handle responsibilities and make decisions for ourselves. Maybe they trusted us a little too much, but we loved it. We weren't just kids at circus camp, we were problem solvers, leaders, and, most importantly, a team. When something went wrong at camp, and things went wrong a lot, it was us circus kids who were called in to help. Whether it was unloading a broken Cisco truck, evacuating the kiddie camp toddlers after a sewer pipe burst, or directing the entire camp to safety during a storm, we were always the first ones on the scene. It didn't matter that most of us were barely in middle school. We took every challenge head-on and earned a kind of respect that no other group at camp ever did. That circus camp leotard became our badge of honor, a symbol of our grit and determination. By the time I was 10, I had fully embraced the identity of a circus camper. I remember one incident vividly. I was heading to the bathroom when I saw a junior camp counselor holding back a group of 13-year-old girls because he couldn't supervise them at that moment. Somehow, it was fine for me, a 10-year-old, to supervise these older girls and let them use the bathroom. The double standard was absurd. And yet, at circus camp, it made sense. We were trusted to handle responsibilities that no one else dared to give us. But circus camp wasn't just about trust and freedom. It was about danger, too. We walked tightropes, leaped from third-story platforms into airbags, and danced 25 feet in the air on silks. It was thrilling, terrifying, and empowering all at once. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what happened when I was 11. That summer, circus camp ran alongside a special aerial dance program led by a world-class instructor. Our director, Stephen, encouraged the oldest circus campers, the 12 and 13-year-olds, to join the program. That left us 11-year-olds as the senior circus campers for the week. We were determined to prove that we were just as tough and capable as the older kids, and we relished the chance to step up. On the second day of camp, chaos erupted. The camp director, Thomas, came to our group with grim news: a 4-year-old from the kiddie camp, Nancy, was missing. Stephen gathered all of us circus campers together. I'll never forget his words: "She's missing. She needs help, and we are it. I want Nancy found, and I want her found now." The weight of those words hit me like a freight train. Stephen split us into two groups. One group, the runners, was made up of 8 campers, including me, and tasked with checking places Nancy was known to hide. The rest of the campers joined the staff in a massive grid search on East Campus, where Nancy was last seen. My group headed to West Campus, to an area called Kiddie Trail. It was a small clearing off a larger trail, surrounded by little Tykes playhouses and ride-on toys that seemed to multiply every year. Kitty Trail was a favorite spot for the youngest campers to play. We found Nancy on Houghton's Trail, not far from Kitty Trail. But she wasn't alone. Two adult men we didn't recognize were trying to drag her away. Panic surged through me. I radioed Stephen immediately, and his response was chilling. If they get her into a car, she's as good as dead. Do whatever you can to stop them. Rocks, sticks, anything. Just don't let them out of your sight. Hearing Stephen's voice crack with fear was terrifying. He was always the unshakable leader, the one who made us feel invincible. If he was scared, then this was more serious than anything I'd ever faced. But I didn't let myself dwell on it. I was the leader of my group, and I had to act fast. I told Stephen we'd cut them off at the bridge over the river. They're not getting past us, I said, my voice filled with a confidence I didn't feel. Stephen's next radio call went out on the all-camp channel. The missing girl is a kidnapping. Several circus campers are engaging. Any available staff, get to Houghton's Trail now. The response was grim. Most of the staff were on the other side of the massive 600-acre campus. We were on our own for at least 8 minutes until backup could arrive. 8 minutes. An eternity when two grown men are trying to take a child. But we had a plan. My group took a shortcut down the switchback trail and reached the bridge before the kidnappers. We armed ourselves with rocks and sticks and waited. When the men appeared, dragging Nancy between them, we attacked with everything we had. We were just kids, but in that moment, we became warriors. I led the charge, swinging a hefty branch like a weapon. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest, but I didn't hesitate. I threw the first rock, and it hit one of the men square in the shoulder. He staggered, more shocked than hurt. Then Jazz joined in, wielding a broken tree limb like a bat, her strikes aimed at the man's knees. Rachel and Tina hurled stones with deadly accuracy, their faces grim and determined. The men were stunned, caught off guard by our ferocity. But their shock quickly turned to anger. One of them lunged at me, knocking the branch out of my hands and shoving me to the ground. He straddled me, his hands wrapping around my throat. "You little brat," he hissed, his grip tightening. "I'll kill you." I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, but I refused to give up. I clawed at his face, my nails digging into his skin. My vision blurred, but I could hear Jazz's furious scream as she swung her makeshift bat at the man's head. The impact sent him reeling off me, and I gasped for air, coughing and sputtering. "Stay down, Max." Jazz shouted, but I was already scrambling to my feet, grabbing a sharp rock and throwing it at the second man. He'd been trying to drag Nancy toward the trailhead, but Rachel and Tina were blocking his path, pelting him with stones. He cursed at them, his face twisted in rage, but he couldn't get past their relentless assault. The first man recovered quickly, his eyes blazing with fury. He charged at me again, but this time, I was ready. I sidestepped his attack and sank my teeth into his arm as hard as I could. He screamed, jerking his arm away, but not before I tasted his blood. It was metallic and bitter, and it made me feel savage, unstoppable. "You're dead," he growled, raising his fist. But before he could strike, the distant sound of running footsteps reached us. The second man froze, his head snapping toward the noise. Dust rose from the trail as a group of figures came into view. It wasn't the camp staff. It was Lucy and Cameron, two of our 13-year-olds from aerial dance camp. And right behind them was my older brother, Derek, leading a pack of high school boys, most of them former circus campers. They were bigger, stronger, and angrier than we were. The kidnappers took one look at them and bolted, abandoning Nancy in their rush to escape. But we didn't let them go easily. Derek and his friends chased them down the trail, while Lucy and Cameron stayed with us. I dropped to my knees beside Nancy, who was sobbing uncontrollably. "You're safe now," I whispered, my voice trembling. "We've got you." It felt like an eternity before the camp coaches and the police arrived. Stephen's face was pale as he took in the scene, Nancy clinging to me, my swollen face and bloody nose, the bruises and scrapes on all of us. He didn't say a word, just knelt down and pulled us into a tight hug. The aftermath was a blur of hospital visits and police reports. I had a fractured skull, a broken nose, and more bruises than I could count. The doctors wanted me to rest, but I insisted on returning to camp for the Friday show. Stephen reluctantly agreed but banned me from performing my wire act. I was furious, but deep down, I understood. The sheriff's department gave us awards for bravery, and the camp director praised us in front of everyone. But it didn't feel like a victory. Nancy was safe, but the memory of those men, their hands, their rage, their intent, haunted me. It still does. That summer changed me. It made me tougher, yes, but it also made me darker. I realized how fragile life was, how easily it could be snatched away. And I learned that sometimes, being a hero means stepping into the darkest parts of yourself, the parts that are willing to bite and claw and fight until there's nothing left. My mother wanted to pull me out of circus camp after that, but my grandfather, a retired Air Force pararescueman, insisted I go back. He said it was where I belonged, and he was right. The next spring, I joined the pre-camp maintenance team, helping to fence off the public trails and install locking gates. I spent every summer there until I aged out, then returned as a counselor and later as a coach. Now, I'm an officer on a search and rescue team. The skills I learned at circus camp, quick thinking, teamwork, courage, are the backbone of my work. And whenever I'm faced with an impossible situation, I hear Stephen's voice in my head, "She needs help, and we are it." Circus camp wasn't just a place. It was a crucible, a forge that tempered us into something stronger. And even though the scars from that summer have faded, the fire it lit inside me never will. The police caught the kidnappers later that evening. They had abandoned their car in the woods near the edge of the camp's property, hoping to evade capture. But the officers, aided by the older campers who knew the trails like the back of their hands, tracked them down. It turned out the men had been part of a larger child trafficking ring operating in the area. Nancy had been their target for days, and their plan had almost succeeded, until a group of kids armed with rocks and sticks stopped them. For the rest of that summer, circus camp felt different. The carefree spirit that had defined it was replaced by an undercurrent of unease. Counselors were more vigilant, and new safety measures were put in place. The trail system was closed to the public, and security guards were stationed at key points around the campus. But for us, the circus campers who had fought back, the change ran deeper. We weren't just kids anymore. We'd faced something most adults couldn't imagine, and we'd come out the other side. There was a weight to that knowledge, a gravity that lingered even as we tried to return to normal. Nancy's parents pulled her out of camp immediately. They sent a letter to the camp director, thanking everyone for their bravery and expressing their gratitude that their daughter was alive. But Nancy didn't come back the next summer, or the summer after that. I don't blame her. Some things are too big to move past. As for me, I struggled with nightmares for months. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, hearing the men's voices, feeling their hands on me. My parents tried to get me to talk to a therapist, but I refused. I didn't want to relive it, didn't want to admit how deeply it had shaken me. Instead, I threw myself into circus camp, into the routines and the challenges that demanded all of my focus. The high wire became my sanctuary, a place where I could forget everything but the tension of the line beneath my feet. By the following summer, I'd become something of a legend at camp. The younger kids looked up to me, whispering stories about the time we'd fought off kidnappers and saved a little girl. The counselors treated me with a mix of respect and concern, watching me closely as if they expected me to break. But I didn't break. If anything, I grew stronger. Stephen was the one who helped me the most. He never brought up what had happened unless I did, but he always made time to talk if I needed it. "You did something incredible," he told me once, as we sat on the edge of the aerial rig, watching the sun set over the camp. "But don't let it define you. You're more than that moment, Max." I didn't fully understand what he meant at the time, but I do now. That summer was a turning point in my life, but it wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of something bigger, something that shaped the person I am today. Now, when I stand at the edge of a cliff or a collapsed building, preparing to rappel down to someone who needs help, I think of that bridge. I think of the fear I felt, the resolve that overcame it, and the moment I decided that failure wasn't an option. And I know that, no matter how dark things get, I can face it. Because I've faced it before, and I'll face it again. Circus camp taught me how to balance, how to fight, and how to lead. But most of all, it taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to act despite it. And that's a lesson I carry with me every day.